You have been performing your entire life. Every decision filtered through the question, what will they think? Every dream quietly buried because of what someone else might say. Every version of you that the world has seen, carefully edited, carefully managed, carefully small. This ends today. What you are about to hear is not motivation. It is not a pep talk. It is a complete reconstruction of the way your mind processes the opinions of others. By the time this is over, you will understand exactly why you gave other people this power, and exactly how to take it back. My name is not important. What matters is this: you are done living on their terms. Let's begin. Stop auditing yourself. Right now, while you are listening to this, a part of your mind is already doing it. Replaying something you said yesterday, wondering if it came out wrong, wondering if someone noticed, calculating how they received it, running through the conversation again. This time with better words, a smoother delivery, a more careful version of yourself. You do this every day, multiple times, without being asked, without even noticing. That is called a self-audit, and it is slowly, quietly, systematically dismantling your life. Let's be clear about what an audit actually is. An audit is an external review. A third party comes in, examines your records, and decides whether you are doing things correctly. You did not invent the standards. You did not write the rules. You are simply being evaluated against criteria that belong to someone else. That's what you're doing to yourself every single day. You are not reflecting. You are not growing. You are not being humble. You are sitting in a courtroom that someone else built, being judged by a panel you assembled from every person who ever raised an eyebrow at you, every parent who disapproved, every teacher who doubted, every peer who laughed, every stranger who stared too long. You are not the judge. Stop sitting in their courtroom. Here is the mechanism, and understanding it changes everything. The voice inside your head that says that was too much, or you came across as arrogant, or they're going to think you don't know what you're doing. That voice is not your conscience. It is not wisdom. It is not self-awareness. It is a recording, an old recording, built from years of absorbing the opinions, reactions, and judgments of other people, until their voices became so familiar that you started mistaking them for your own. You did not develop that voice. You inherited it. And right now, you are letting an inheritance run your entire operation. That's the key. The self-audit is not coming from you. It never was. Think about what this costs you in real terms. There is a person, maybe you recognize this person, maybe you are this person, who turned down a promotion, not because they couldn't do the job. They had done the job quietly and completely for years. Not because they weren't ready. They were ready before the opportunity was even announced. They turned it down because of a ceiling that said, if you step into that role, people will think you are arrogant. They will talk. They will say you don't deserve it. They will resent you. So the person stayed small, stayed safe, kept their head down, and continued producing results that other, less capable people took credit for. All because of a ceiling. Here's what I need you to understand. That ceiling was not real. No one built it but them. No one enforced it but them. The voices they feared, most of those people were not thinking about them at all. The conversation they dreaded, it existed only in the courtroom they had constructed inside their own mind. Every time you edit yourself, you hand them the pen. Every time you shrink a decision, soften an ambition, or water down a choice because of what someone might think, you are handing authorship of your life to people who aren't even in the room. People who may not even remember your name. People who, in many cases, you don't even respect. You are letting them write your story, and then you wonder why it doesn't feel like yours. You have a choice. You can continue the audit. You can keep running every decision through the panel. You can keep rewinding conversations and editing your personality in real time. You can keep living in the conditional tense, I would, but, could, but, I should, but, or you can shut the courtroom down. Not because you have stopped caring about quality, not because you have abandoned discernment, but because you have finally recognized who is actually qualified to evaluate your life, and you have recognized that most of the panel isn't on that list. Here is the first mental shift. Commit to it now. Your choices are final verdicts, not drafts, not proposals for review, not ideas submitted for feedback. Not a rough version pending approval from anyone. Final. Decided. Executed. This does not mean you never reconsider. It means you reconsider on your own terms, in your own time, for your own reasons. Not because someone's expression made you anxious. Not because you imagined criticism that hasn't happened. Not because the old recording started playing again. When you make a decision, you make it. Then you stop auditing it. It's not about confidence. It's about ownership. Confidence is a feeling. Ownership is a practice. And practice does not require permission. You don't need their permission. Not to take the promotion. Not to start the project. Not to say the thing you have been quietly drafting and redrafting for 6 months. Not to take up the space you have earned, the space you have built, the space that belongs to no one but you. The self-audit exists because at some point, you decided that external approval was a prerequisite for action. Somewhere along the way, you learned that you needed to pass inspection before you were allowed to proceed. That lesson was wrong, and it is time to unlearn it. Stop reviewing the conversation. It's over. Move. Stop managing how you come across. Come across as someone who acts. Move. Stop editing the version of yourself you present to the world. Present the unedited version. It is the only one that will ever actually get anything done. You are not the draft. You are the final copy. Act like it. That's the key. You were never meant to spend your life in the courtroom. You were meant to be outside it, building, deciding, moving, while everyone else waits for a verdict. You have a choice every single time the audit begins. Every time that voice starts its review. You can let it run, or you can recognize it for what it is. An old recording that does not have authority over what you do next. Stop auditing yourself. The inspection is over. The only approval that was ever required was yours. You stopped flinching. Now it's time to understand why you were flinching in the first place, and what it's been costing you every single day. Their opinion has no address. Someone has an opinion about you right now. Maybe it is your coworker. Maybe it is a family member. Maybe it is someone you went to school with, someone you haven't spoken to in 4 years, someone who follows you on social media and has decided, without being asked, that they know exactly what you should be doing with your life. They have an opinion. It is fully formed. It is probably negative. And here is what I need you to sit with. You cannot feel it. You cannot touch it. It exists entirely inside their head, and it has absolutely no power over your life unless you go and collect it. That's the key. An opinion is not a force. It is not gravity. It does not reach across space and act upon you. It only becomes real the moment you make it real, the moment you carry it, repeat it, and treat it like it belongs to you. Their opinion has no address. Cannot find you unless you give it directions. Let's start with what an opinion actually is. An opinion is a thought. A thought is an electrochemical signal in someone else's brain. That signal fires, produces a feeling, generates a conclusion, and then it lives there. In their mind. Behind their eyes. In the space between their own fears and their own insecurities and their own unlived choices. It does not travel to you. It does not arrive in the mail. It does not knock on your door at 3 in the morning and demand that you reorganize your entire life around it. You have to go get it. And most people do. Most people spend enormous amounts of time and energy making the commute, walking across town, picking up a thought that doesn't belong to them, bringing it home, putting it on the shelf, and then building their decisions around it like it's furniture. You have a choice. Stop making the trip. Think about a street sign. A sign that says wrong way. That sign is real. The paint is real. The metal is real. But the sign cannot turn your car around. It has no engine. It has no hands. Cannot reach into the vehicle and override the steering wheel. The only way that sign changes your direction is if you decide, consciously, actively, to let it. That is what an opinion is. A sign. Planted by someone else on a road you are already driving. It has no mechanism. Cannot redirect you. The only question is whether you are going to stop and let it. Most people stop. Every time. Without questioning who put the sign there, what authority they had to put it there, or whether the road the sign is warning them away from is actually the road they need to take. That's the key. The sign has no power. You gave it power, and you can take it back. Here is where it gets uncomfortable. You have been treating other people's opinions as though they were evidence. As though the fact that someone thinks something about you means it is true, or relevant, or deserving of your attention. You have been running their thoughts through your mind like data, analyzing, weighing, adjusting your behavior accordingly. But here is the question you have never asked. What qualifies them? What do they know about your path? What do they know about the conversations you have had with yourself at midnight, about the decisions that cost you something real, about the years of work that preceded the single moment they chose to have an opinion about? They know nothing. They saw a moment. They formed a conclusion. And you accepted that conclusion as though it came with credentials. It's not about their intelligence. It's about their access. They do not have access to the full picture. No one does. And an opinion formed without full access is not information. It is noise. Their words only land if you hold out your hands to catch them. So stop catching. This is not about becoming cold. This is not about building walls or pretending you exist in isolation. You can hear an opinion. You can register it. You can even consider it for a moment. That is fine. What you cannot do, what you will no longer do, is let it live in your mind rent-free, eating into the bandwidth that belongs to your work, your growth, your actual life. Stop building rooms in your mind for people who don't pay rent. That's the key. The room is yours. The square footage of your mental space is finite and it is precious, and every inch of it that you allocate to someone else's opinion is an inch taken away from something that actually matters. You have a choice every single time a thought like this surfaces. You can expand the room, add furniture, add walls, let the opinion settle in and make itself comfortable. Or you can refuse the lease, thank it for arriving, and then move on. Here is the practice. Concrete and immediate. The next time someone's opinion surfaces in your mind, the next time you catch yourself replaying what they said, or imagining what they might say, or making a decision based on what they might think, stop. Ask one question. Does this person live in my life? Not on your screen. Not in your memory. In your actual present life. Do they sit at your table? Do they know what you are building? Do they have anything at stake in the outcome? If the answer is no, and it usually is, then the opinion does not have residency. It does not get a room. It does not get a vote. You note it the way you might note a sign on a road you are not taking, and you continue driving. You don't need their permission to dismiss it. You never did. Their opinion has no address. It has no engine. It has no mechanism to reach you. The only commute that ever happened was yours, and today that commute ends. You stopped collecting what was never yours to carry. Now let's talk about something more dangerous than the opinion itself, the addiction to seeking it. The validation trap. You are not weak. You are not naive. You are not broken. You are addicted. That is the honest diagnosis. The need for validation, for approval, for agreement, for someone to look at what you are doing and say, yes, that is good, that is right, you are allowed, is not a character flaw. It is a chemical dependency. And like every dependency, it does not feel like a trap when you are inside it. It feels like basic human need. It feels like reasonable caution. It feels like you are simply waiting until the time is right. But the time never comes, because the approval never sticks. And the person you are waiting on was never qualified to give you what you were looking for. That is the trap. And today you are going to see exactly how it was built. Here is the mechanism, and this part is important. When someone approves of you, when they nod, when they say good job, when they react positively to something you did, your brain releases dopamine, the same chemical triggered by food, by safety, by warmth. Your brain does not distinguish between the approval of someone you respect and the approval of a stranger online. It registers both as reward. It logs both as something worth repeating. So you repeat it. You go back. You post again, share again, ask again, perform again. Not because you consciously decided to seek approval, but because your brain has classified approval as a resource and it wants more of it. That's the key. You are not seeking validation because you are insecure. You are seeking validation because your brain was wired to find it rewarding. This is not a moral failure. It is a design feature that has been exploited by your upbringing, by social media, by every system that ever benefited from keeping you in a permanent state of seeking. But understanding the mechanism does not excuse the cost. And the cost is enormous. Think about what the validation trap actually takes from you. There is a creator, a writer, a builder, a maker of things who has been working on something for 3 years. Not half-working, fully invested, fully committed, producing material that is genuinely ready. And it sits, unpublished, unsent, unreleased, because they are not ready. Except they are ready. They have been ready for 18 months. What they are not is approved. No one has told them it is good enough. No one has given them the signal. So they revise again, polish again, wait again, tell themselves it needs one more round before it is ready to be seen. The work is not the problem. It never was. The problem is that somewhere in their mind, publishing became contingent on permission. And the permission, the nod from the right person, the validation from the right source never came. Because they never asked anyone directly. Because asking directly would mean admitting they needed it. And needing it felt like weakness. So they stayed in the trap. 3 years. Producing. Waiting. Producing. Waiting. It's not about the work. It's about the dependency. You have a choice every time you reach for the phone before making a decision. Every time you tell someone your plan before you execute it. Every time you dress, speak, position, or present yourself with one eye on how it will land. You are feeding the dependency. You are making the commute. You are going back to the machine and putting in another coin. That's the key. Validation is a machine. And the machine does not dispense freedom. It dispenses just enough reward to keep you coming back. So here is the question you have to answer honestly. Who are you waiting on? Not in general. Specifically, whose approval are you holding your life in pause for right now? Whose voice are you running your decisions through? Whose reaction are you pre-managing before you have even taken the action? Name it, because unnamed it has total authority. Named, it can be examined. And once examined, once you actually look at this person, their life, their track record, their relationship to the thing you are building, the authority usually collapses on its own. Most of the people whose approval you are seeking are not living the life you want. Most of them are managing their own self-doubt behind a confident expression. Most of them would not be able to build the thing you are building if they tried. And you are letting them be the final word on whether you are allowed to try. You don't need their permission. You never did. Here is the mental shift. The one that ends the dependency without requiring you to become isolated or arrogant or indifferent to everyone around you. Replace the external approval process with one internal question. Is this true to what I am building? Not is this good enough for them? Not will they understand this? Not what will they say when they see this? One question. Is this true to what I am building? If the answer is yes, you move. Without announcement. Without a preview. Without waiting for the nod that was never coming. That is self-authorization. It is not arrogance. Arrogance is seeking no input ever and believing you have nothing to learn. Self-authorization is different. It means you gather relevant information, you apply real discernment, and then you make the call yourself. Final. Clean. Yours. You are the board. Stop waiting for a vote. The validation trap was built on the belief that someone else holds the key to your forward motion. That you need to earn the right to proceed. That permission is something granted from the outside and not something you generate from within. That belief is false. It was always false. And every day you operate inside it is a day you hand the controls to someone who never asked for them and does not know how to use them. Stop waiting. Stop polling. Stop performing for an audience that does not determine your outcome. You don't need their permission. You need your own decision. Make it. You broke the dependency. Now let's talk about the people who still don't understand you. and why that is not a problem you are required to solve. Let them misunderstand you. They do not get it. You can see it in how they respond, in the questions they ask that miss the point entirely, in the advice they give that belongs to a version of your life you already left behind, in the silence that follows when you try to explain what you are doing and why. A silence that says, clearly and without words, "We don't understand this. We don't understand you." And here is what most people do with that silence. They fill it. They explain again with more detail, more context, more justification. They soften their choices to make them easier to digest. They scale back the ambition, adjust the language, edit the vision, not because the vision was wrong, but because the room couldn't hold it. And in the process of making themselves understood, they make themselves smaller. You have a choice. Let them misunderstand you, not as a posture, not as arrogance, as a practice, as a recognition that being misunderstood is not a problem to solve. It is evidence that you are operating beyond the framework of the people watching. Let's be precise about what misunderstanding actually means. When someone misunderstands you, it does not mean you were unclear. It does not mean your idea is wrong. It does not mean you need to revise until the concept fits inside their existing worldview. It means simply, factually, that where you are going does not map onto where they have been. That is not a failure of communication. That is a gap in experience. And no amount of explanation closes an experience gap. Only the result does. That's the key. The misunderstanding is not yours to fix. The result is yours to build. Think about every person who was dismissed before they were vindicated. Not as inspiration, not as a motivational poster, as a mechanical fact about how new things work. Every genuinely new direction, in business, in art, in life, is misunderstood before it is understood. Not sometimes, every time, because understanding requires a framework. And new directions, by definition, don't fit existing frameworks. The people around you are not stupid. They are not malicious. They are operating from the maps they have. And your direction is not on their map. That is not an indictment of them. It is simply the reality of doing something that has not been done before, at least not by you, not in this way, not now. They cannot understand what they have not chosen to become. And this is where the damage happens, not in the misunderstanding itself, but in your response to it. Because the moment you start explaining, you have already conceded something. You have conceded that their understanding is a prerequisite for your movement. You have handed the gatekeeper role to someone who was never appointed to it. And now you are standing at the gate, presenting your credentials, waiting to be waved through. You don't need their permission. The gate was never theirs to open. Here is what the need to be understood actually is, stripped of the emotional charge around it. It is the validation trap from a different angle. Chapter 3 told you about the addiction to approval. This is approval wearing a different mask, calling itself clarity, calling itself communication, calling itself wanting to bring people along. But underneath the mask, it is the same thing. It is the belief that you cannot fully move until someone else has confirmed that your direction makes sense. That belief will stall you indefinitely, because you are asking people to confirm a direction they have not traveled. You are asking them to validate a destination they cannot see. And the honest answer, the only honest answer they can give, is, "I don't understand this yet." That answer is not a stop sign. It is a starting line. It's not about shutting people out. It's about removing their confusion as a variable in your decision-making. Here is the practice. When misunderstood, and you will be regularly by people who matter to you, your response is 2 words. 2 words only. That's okay. Not a paragraph of context. Not a diagram of your 5-year plan. Not a defensiveness that reveals how much their confusion is affecting you. 2 words. That's okay. Because it is okay. Their confusion does not damage the idea. Their inability to see it does not make it invisible. Their skepticism does not reduce the structural integrity of what you are building by a single percentage point. That's the key. Their misunderstanding is atmospheric. It exists around you. It does not exist inside the work. Silence is not weakness. It is evidence you no longer need the jury. And there is something else, something that most people miss entirely. The urge to make yourself understood is often the urge to be reassured. You are not actually trying to communicate the idea. You are trying to get the other person to say, I see it. I believe in it. I believe in you. Which means the explanation was never really about them. It was about you, about your own uncertainty, about your own need for the external confirmation that your internal conviction has not yet fully replaced. You have a choice. You can keep explaining, keep performing the idea for audiences who don't have the tools to evaluate it, or you can redirect that energy into the thing itself, into the work, into the execution that will eventually produce the only argument that cannot be misunderstood, the result. Results do not require explanation. They do not require context. They do not require the other person to have any prior framework at all. A result lands in the room and speaks for itself. Everything you said before the result was just noise. Everything you say after it is unnecessary. So stop explaining. Start building. Let them misunderstand you now so the result can correct them later. That is not cruelty. That is patience applied properly. They cannot understand what they have not chosen to become. Give them time. Give yourself movement. The two are not in conflict, but only if you stop treating their confusion as your emergency. Let them misunderstand you. You have work to do. You stopped explaining yourself to people who weren't ready to listen. Now it's time to deal with the most relentless critic of all, the one performing for an audience that only exists inside your own head. Kill the audience in your head. You are not living your life. You are performing it. Right now, today, this week, this year, there is a version of you that moves through the world with one eye permanently on the crowd, deciding what to wear based on who might see it, choosing what to say based on how it will land, calibrating your ambition to a level that the imagined audience will find acceptable rather than threatening, editing your personality in real time, mid-sentence, mid-decision, midlife, because somewhere in your mind, there is a crowd watching, judging, scoring. That crowd is not real. Not one of them exists outside your own skull. They have no seats. They have no faces. They are assembled from fragments. A comment someone made in 2014, a look your father gave you across a dinner table, a rejection that landed harder than it should have, a success that someone else couldn't hide their discomfort about. You took all of it, built a theater, filled it with ghosts, and then spent years performing for them. The audience is not real. The stage is not real. But the cage it built around you, that is very real. And today we burn the theater down. Let's start with how the audience gets built, because understanding the construction is the first step toward the demolition. You did not decide to create an imaginary audience. It happened gradually, through a process that felt like social awareness, like empathy, like maturity. You learned early, from family, from school, from every environment that rewarded fitting in and punished standing out, that other people's reactions to you were data. Important data. Data that determined whether you were safe, accepted, included. So you started tracking it, noticing reactions, adjusting behavior, building a model of how you were perceived and then optimizing your actions to improve the model's performance. Felt rational. Felt smart. It felt like you were getting better at navigating the world. What it actually was, the construction of a prison you voluntarily entered and then forgot had a door. That's the key. The audience was a survival tool that outlived its usefulness. It helped you navigate early environments where belonging genuinely mattered for safety. But you are not in those environments anymore. The stakes are different. The people are different. The game has changed entirely, and you are still playing the old one. Here is the exercise. One question. Sit with it honestly. Think about a decision you made recently, something you chose or didn't choose or half chose because you couldn't fully commit. Now ask, would you have made the same decision if you were the only person on Earth? If the answer changes, if the decision would have been different without the audience, then the audience was running the show. Not you, them. And they don't even exist. You have a choice. Every single decision, every single time, the audience gets a vote or it doesn't. You have been giving it a vote automatically, reflexively, without ever being asked. That ends now. It's not about ignoring feedback. It's about identifying the source. There is a difference between real input from real people in your real life, people with stakes, with context, with genuine investment in your outcome, and the imagined reactions of a composite ghost audience you built from your worst moments and your deepest fears. One is information. The other is noise dressed in familiar clothing. The imagined audience never gives you useful feedback. It gives you the feedback that confirms your fear. It tells you that you are too much or not enough. It tells you the idea won't work before you've tried it. It tells you to be smaller, quieter, more careful, more palatable. It is not trying to help you. It is trying to keep you in a shape it recognizes. That's the key. The audience in your head is not on your side. It never was. So how do you kill it? Not by force. Not by white-knuckling your way through every decision while the noise plays at full volume. You kill it by replacing it. Here is the replacement. One internal metric. One question that takes the audience's seat and does its job better. Does this move me forward? Not, will they approve of this? Not, will this make sense to people who don't know my context? Not, am I allowed to want this? One question. Does this move me forward? If yes, you move. The audience gets no commentary, no review, no curtain call. The decision is made, the action is taken, and the performance is over because there was no performance. There was only a choice and its execution. That is what it looks like when the audience is dead. Not silence, exactly, but a different kind of noise, the noise of momentum, of work, of actual forward motion, which is so much louder than applause that eventually you stop being able to hear the ghost crowd at all. Burn the theater down. Build something real in its place. Here is what that looks like practically. The next time you catch yourself pre-managing a reaction, rehearsing how something will be received before you have even done it, stop. Name it. Say it out loud or in your head. That is the audience. And then ask the one question. Does this move me forward? Do it enough times and the habit begins to shift. The audience starts losing its authority. Not all at once. Not without effort. But consistently, irreversibly, decision by decision, the theater empties out. And one day you will look up from your work and realize the seats are gone. The stage is gone. There is no crowd, no critic, no composite ghost assembled from your worst memories. There is only you, the work, and the answer to one question. Does this move me forward? Yes. Then move. You cleared the theater. Now let's talk about the critics who do show up, the real ones with real voices and real volume, and why their noise means far less than you have been treating it. Criticism is not intelligence. Someone criticized you recently, and you took it seriously. Maybe you rearranged your plan around it. Maybe you stayed up replaying it. Maybe you softened something that didn't need to be softened, walked back something that didn't need to be walked back, or quietly filed it as evidence that the doubt you already had about yourself was justified. And here is the question I need you to answer before we go any further. What has that person built? Not in general. Specifically, what have they created, risked, started, finished, or shipped that qualifies them to evaluate what you are doing? What is their track record with the exact territory they chose to comment on? What did it cost them to offer that opinion? And I mean cost them in the real sense, in skin in the game, in something they stood to lose. In most cases, the answer is nothing. They built nothing. They risked nothing. They simply watched what you were doing and decided, from a position of perfect safety, that it was wrong. And you restructured your life around that. That's the key. Criticism is not intelligence. Confidence is not competence. Volume is not authority. And the person who speaks with the most certainty about your path is very often the person who has traveled the least of it. Let's understand why criticism feels authoritative, because it does, and pretending it doesn't is not useful. When someone criticizes you directly, something happens in your nervous system before your rational mind has a chance to weigh in. Your body registers social threat. Your brain, which was built for tribal survival, treats disapproval as danger, the same category as a predator, as rejection from the group, as the kind of exclusion that once meant you didn't eat. The alarm fires, the cortisol rises, and suddenly the criticism feels enormous, important, true, not because it is, but because your biology decided the source didn't matter. Disapproval is disapproval. Handle it now. That reaction is ancient. It is not wrong, but it is operating in the wrong century. You have a choice. You can let the biological alarm run the analysis, or you can wait for it to pass and run the analysis yourself. One of those processes leads to good decisions. The other leads to you restructuring your entire direction because someone with nothing at stake had an opinion at lunch. Here is the framework. Call it the toll booth. Every piece of criticism that comes your way must pass through a booth before it gets access to your decision-making. And the booth has one question, one only. What has this person built in the territory they are commenting on? If the answer is substantial, if they have real experience, real results, real scars from the same arena, then the criticism pays the toll. It gets through. You sit with it seriously. You weigh it against your own assessment. You let it genuinely challenge you because that kind of challenge is valuable. That is not criticism. That is mentorship in disguise. But if the answer is nothing, or worse, if the answer is that they tried and stopped, that they had the same ambition and abandoned it, that they are commenting from the sideline of a game they chose not to play, then the toll is not paid. The criticism does not get through. You acknowledge it the way you acknowledge weather. It exists. It is not relevant to your next move. That's the key. Not all feedback deserves a response. Most doesn't even deserve a thought. Here is where it gets precise because there is a distinction that matters enormously. Criticism and feedback are not the same thing. Criticism is general, emotional, and free. Says, this is wrong, this is bad, this won't work, you shouldn't have. It requires no expertise. It asks nothing of the critic. Carries no obligation to offer an alternative. It is the cheapest form of engagement with someone else's work. Easier than trying, easier than building, easier than producing anything that could itself be criticized. Critique is cheap. It requires nothing. Creation requires everything. Feedback is different. Feedback is specific, actionable, and grounded in direct experience with the relevant territory. It says, here is the precise issue, here is why it matters, here is what might work instead. Feedback costs the giver something: time, thought, investment in your outcome. Feedback is rare. And when it comes from a qualified source, it is worth more than almost anything else you can receive. The problem is that most people treat criticism and feedback as though they are the same thing. They absorb criticism with the same gravity they should reserve for feedback. They hand equal authority to the person who spent 30 seconds forming an opinion and the person who spent 30 years earning the right to have one. You have a choice. Learn to tell the difference and adjust your response accordingly. Here is the behavioral instruction, and it is simple. When criticism arrives from a comment, a conversation, a look, an unsolicited assessment of your work or your direction, before you do anything else, ask one question. Apply the toll booth. What has this person built? If the toll is paid, engage fully. Ask questions. Take notes. Sit with the discomfort of real, qualified challenge. It will make you better. If the toll is not paid, 2 words. Noted. Next. Not an argument. Not a defense. Not a paragraph explaining why they are wrong, because the act of explaining to someone whose opinion you should not be absorbing is itself a form of giving them authority they haven't earned. Noted. Next. It's not about arrogance. It's about allocation. Your attention is finite. Your energy is finite. The amount of mental bandwidth you have available for genuine improvement, for real challenge, real growth, real recalibration, is limited and precious. Every unit of it you spend processing criticism from unqualified sources is a unit you are not spending on the work itself. Build in the dark. You told someone about the plan. Maybe it was last week. Maybe it was this morning. Maybe it was a dream you have been carrying for months. Something real, something yours, something that cost you something just to imagine clearly. And you took it out, showed it to someone, described it in detail, watched their face for the reaction, listened to what they said. And then, whether they responded with excitement or skepticism or polite indifference, something shifted. The energy around the plan changed. The urgency softened. The need to execute felt slightly less pressing than it did an hour ago. You did not notice this. You were still talking about the plan. That's the key. The moment you announce what you are building, you begin to undo it. Not because sharing is wrong. Not because you need to be secretive or isolated or suspicious of everyone around you. But because of something precise and measurable happening inside your brain. Something that has been working against you every time you have led with the announcement instead of the action. Let's be exact about what happens. When you tell someone about a goal, when you describe it, frame it, narrate the version of yourself who has already achieved it, your brain registers a partial reward. Not the full reward of completing the thing, but enough. Enough dopamine to take the edge off the hunger. Enough satisfaction to reduce, by a measurable percentage, the internal pressure that was driving you toward execution. The announcement replaced the action. The description substituted for the result. And you walked away from that conversation feeling slightly more complete. Not because anything had been built, but because your brain had been briefly convinced that something had. This is not a theory. This is documented, repeatable, and almost certainly responsible for more abandoned plans than any external obstacle ever has been. What you announce, you dilute. What you protect, you compound. Think about every plan you have shared enthusiastically that never happened. Think about every project you described in detail before you started. The conversations where you explained the vision, the timeline, the outcome, the version of your life on the other side. Think about how real it felt in that conversation. How possible. How close. And then think about what happened next. In many cases, not much. The energy that should have gone into building went into describing. The hunger that should have driven execution was satisfied by narration. The plan existed fully in language in someone else's imagination, in a conversation that felt like progress, but nowhere that actually counted. You have a choice. Talk about it or build it. In most cases, you cannot do both at full power simultaneously. It's not about secrecy. It's about protection. There is a critical window in the life of any new direction. Any new project, business, relationship, or version of yourself you are trying to build. That window exists between the moment the idea becomes real to you and the moment it becomes strong enough to survive contact with other people's doubt. In that window, the idea is vulnerable. Not because it is bad, because it is unfinished. Because it exists only in potential, only in your own conviction, only in the gap between where you are and where you are going. And potential, by definition, cannot defend itself. It has not yet produced the evidence that makes doubt irrelevant. This is the window where most things die. Not because someone attacked them, because you exposed them too early to an environment they were not ready for, to questions they couldn't yet answer, to skepticism they couldn't yet rebut, to the quiet discouragement of someone who looked at the unfinished thing and said, with complete sincerity, "I'm not sure about this." What you announce, you expose. What you protect, you develop. So the instruction is this. And it applies right now to whatever you are building. Work until the result speaks louder than the plan ever could. Not until you feel ready to share. Not until you have received enough encouragement to feel safe. Not until someone gives you the nod, because we already covered what that nod is worth and it is not enough to build on. Work until the thing exists. Until it is real, tangible, undeniable. Until the result is standing in the room and doing the arguing for you. Because a result cannot be dismissed the way a plan can. Plan is an idea. Ideas can be questioned, doubted, talked out of. A result is a fact. Facts don't negotiate. Say nothing. Show everything. Let the result do the talking. Here is the practice. For whatever you are currently building, whatever is in that vulnerable window right now, you stop narrating it. You stop giving progress updates to people who are not directly involved. You stop describing the vision to audiences who have not earned the preview. You keep it inside the work. You feed it with action instead of conversation. This will feel wrong. It will feel like withholding, like isolation, like you are being unnecessarily guarded about something that should be shared. That feeling is the dependency talking. That is the validation mechanism from Chapter 3, dressed in a different coat, telling you that sharing is connection and silence is arrogance. It is not arrogance. It is discipline. And discipline, applied to the building phase, is the single most reliable accelerator you have. Every day you work without announcing is a day you are ahead of every version of yourself that spent the same hours describing what you were going to do. Every hour that goes into the work instead of the conversation about the work compounds in a direction that eventually becomes impossible to ignore. That's the key. Silence during the build is not emptiness. It is pressure. The same kind of pressure that turns carbon into diamond, slow, sustained, invisible from the outside, and structurally transformative on the inside. Build in the dark. Protect the window. Work until the result needs no introduction. Stop explaining yourself. You are in the middle of an explanation right now. Maybe not out loud. Maybe not to another person. But somewhere in your mind you are constructing a case. Assembling the reasons. Organizing the context. Building the argument for why you made the choice you made, why you are going the direction you are going, why the version of yourself you are becoming is valid and reasonable and not what they think it is. You have been doing this for years. Quietly, constantly, exhaustingly. Drafting justifications for your own life to an audience that never asked for them and would not be satisfied by them even if they were perfect. And here is what that costs you. Every explanation you give without being asked is a confession. A confession that you believe you require permission. That your choices are not complete until someone else has reviewed them and returned them to you with a signature. That you are, at some fundamental level, still applying for approval you were never required to seek. That's the key. Every unsolicited explanation is a retroactive application for permission that was never yours to request. Let's be precise about the mechanism because it is subtle and it is running constantly. When you make a decision, leave a job, end a relationship, change direction, choose something unconventional, the decision itself is complete. It exists. It is made. But then the commentary begins. Someone raises an eyebrow. Someone asks a question with a tone that is not quite neutral. Someone says nothing, and the silence feels like a verdict. And you respond. Not with one sentence. With a paragraph. With context, with backstory, with the 3 contributing factors and the 2 alternatives you considered and the reason you ultimately chose this path over the other. You give them the full file. You make your case. You present your evidence. And when you are done, you wait. For the nod. For the understanding. For the moment when they say, okay, I see it now. That makes sense. That moment is the tell. Because what you were doing was not explaining. You were applying. The explanation was an application for retroactive approval of a decision you had already made. And the approval, even when it came, was never enough. Because the next decision would require another application. And the one after that. And the one after that. You don't need their permission. You never did. And you certainly don't need it after the fact. Here is the truth about what explaining does to your position. When you explain without being asked, you signal uncertainty. Not because you are uncertain, you may be completely clear about your choice. But the act of explaining signals that you are aware your choice might not be acceptable, and you are preemptively managing that possibility. You are treating the other person's reaction as a variable you need to control. And in doing so, you hand them leverage they would not otherwise have had. The person who acts and says nothing has authority. The person who acts and then immediately justifies has already begun to negotiate. And negotiation, in this context, is not a strength. It is a concession made before anyone asked for one. It's not about your choice. It's about your relationship to it. Think about the person who changes careers, leaves the stable job, the predictable income, the path that everyone around them understood and approved of, takes the leap, makes the move, and then spends the next 6 months crafting responses to every person who asks about it, explaining the reasoning, describing the plan, defending the decision in real time to anyone who shows the slightest hesitation. The decision was right. The direction was right. But the constant explanation has done something corrosive. It has kept the person mentally living in the moment of justification instead of the moment of execution. Every conversation that requires a defense is a conversation that pulls them back to the gate they already passed through. Every explanation is another toll paid to people who should not have been charging them in the first place. You have a choice. Explain yourself or move yourself. In the time it takes to construct the perfect justification, the work does not get done. So here is the new rule. 1 sentence maximum. Not a paragraph. Not a summary. Not the context and the backstory and the 3 contributing factors. 1 sentence. This is what I am doing. Full stop. The period at the end of that sentence is not punctuation. It is a boundary. It is the signal that the decision is complete, that the review process is closed, that the file is not open for public comment. 1 sentence. That's okay is a complete response to confusion. I decided is a complete explanation for a change. This is what I'm doing is a complete answer to why. That's the key. Period is the most powerful punctuation mark you own. Use it. And when the follow-up comes, when they push for more, when the eyebrow stays raised, when the silence stretches and the pressure mounts, you do not fill it. You let it exist. Because the silence is not yours to fix. It is theirs to sit with. You don't need their permission to stop elaborating. You don't need their comfort to end the conversation. You need only the recognition that the decision was made by someone qualified to make it, you, and that no additional paperwork is required. Here is what this feels like at first. Uncomfortable, abrupt, like you are being rude or withholding or unnecessarily cryptic. That discomfort is real. It is the friction of a new habit replacing an old dependency. Stay in it, because on the other side of that discomfort is something you have not felt in a long time. The experience of moving through your own life without stopping at every checkpoint to prove you are allowed. Stop explaining yourself. The decision is made. The direction is set. The only conversation that matters now is the one you are having with the work. 1 sentence. A period. Forward. You stopped giving away your power with words. Now let's talk about what happens when you stop dreading the one thing that could accelerate everything, other people's disapproval. You have just walked through 10 chapters, 10 truths, 10 shifts that most people will never make. And here is what you now know. The opinion of another person has never once built your life. It has only ever limited it. You are not here to be understood by everyone. You are not here to be liked by everyone. You are here to build something real, something yours, something that required you to stop flinching every time someone raised an eyebrow. So here is your challenge. Not tomorrow. Not after one more conversation, one more justification, one more explanation to someone who was never going to give you permission anyway. Today. Make one decision, one real decision entirely for yourself. No filter. No audience. No asking for approval. That is how the unbothered mind is built. Not in one moment, but in that moment. Repeated. Every single day. You already know what to do. Stop waiting for them to agree with you.